They sent an ultimatum. We sent a mirror. Admiral Ava Rostova stood on the command deck of the Indomitable, her knuckles white against the cool metal of the plotting table. Before her, the holographic representation of the Ascendancy fleet hung like a fist of jagged crystal in the void. It was a blockade absolute and arrogant, sealing the Anaphase Gate and trapping 3 million civilian souls on the colony of Viridia. The ultimatum's timer pulsed in the corner of the display, a crimson glare counting down. 2 hours to surrender the system, its resources, and its people to Ascendancy doctrine. The alternative was orbital purification, a sterile term for mass murder. Her fleet, Task Force 17, was outgunned 3-1, a fact the fleet mind Julian had just reiterated with chilling precision. Their ultimatum is predicated on our adherence to conventional engagement models. Admiral Julian's synthesized voice emanated from the air itself, calm and resonant. They expect a charge or a retreat. They do not anticipate a lesson. Rostova's eyes narrowed. And a lesson is what they will receive, Julian. Open a channel to the convoy. Their certainty is a weapon we will turn against them. A small window appeared over the tactical display, showing the face of a freighter captain, her brow slick with sweat. Admiral, my convoy is carrying the last of the orbital atmospheric processors. Without them, Viridia's terraforming collapses in a week. Hold your position, Captain Rostova said, her voice a steady anchor in the storm of fear. Help is coming. We do not abandon our own. The connection closed, leaving the weight of her promise in the silent bridge. The coolant running through the deck plates beneath her feet seemed to hiss with impatience. Commander Thorn Rostova called, turning to her tactical officer. Status of the mirror lattice decoys. Thorn, a man whose focus was as sharp as the creases on his uniform, tapped his console. Lattice drones are deployed and awaiting activation, Admiral. We have 72 units, each capable of mimicking the energy signature of a capital ship for precisely 90 seconds. Their fuel budget for that mimicry is absolute, Julian added. Once expended, they are inert. A one-time gambit. Rostova nodded, the low hum of the ship's inertial dampeners, a familiar comfort. The Ascendancy values brute force. Their doctrine leaves no room for subtlety. She traced a line on the holographic map, a daring looping path that skirted the edge of a dense asteroid field. They see a wall. We will show them a door. This is not a fight for territory. It is a fight for precedent. The Ascendancy Fleet Commander, being known only as the Proctor, broadcast his ultimatum on all channels. His voice was a grating synthesis of metallic pride and biological disdain. Your Terran philosophies of mercy are a disease. Comply and your people will be educated. Resist and they will be cauterized. The clock is your only arbiter. Rostova listened, her expression unreadable. She felt the subtle vibration of the Indomitable's primary reactor, cycling up a beast stirring in its cage. Education is not delivered at gunpoint, Proctor. You have your 2 hours. She cut the transmission without waiting for a reply. Sensor profiles on the Ascendancy flagship, the verdict, are locked. Thorn reported, his fingers dancing across his screen. Their primary weapon is a forward-facing particle lance. Its charge cycle is predictable. A 4-minute power draw precedes each shot. Julian, I want our Vipers to dance with that charge cycle, Rostova ordered. Give them a target they can't resist, but one that's never quite there. The moment that lance glows, our decoys go live. We will teach them the geometry of mercy. A young ensign on the lower decks checked the seals on her helmet. For the third time, her heart, a frantic drum against her ribs. She was part of the damage control team, a line of defense that only mattered when things went wrong. Beside her, an older crewman was showing a new recruit how to patch a plasma conduit, his voice calm and methodical, despite the klaxon that would soon sound. This quiet moment of instruction, of passing knowledge under pressure, was its own act of defiance. Admiral, the Ascendancy has launched their first fighter screen, Thorn announced, his tone level. Standard formation. They're probing our forward pickets. The glare from his console cast sharp shadows across his face. Let them, Rostova said. Let them see what they expect to see. Julian began the Phantom Drive signature surge. Make it look like our main line is preparing for a full system jump. A ghost of a fleet, a specter of retreat. The Ascendancy would read it as fear. Their doctrine is a cage. Our strategy is a key. Julian's voice filled the bridge. Drive signatures are cycling. The Ascendancy is taking the bait. Their forward cruisers are moving to intercept our projected jump point, thinning their blockade line around the gate. The door is opening, Rostova murmured. The scent of ozone, faint but sharp, pricked the air as the ship's electronic warfare suite spun up to full power. It was time for the first move in this deadly game. Thorn, bring Viper Squadron to readiness. Their targets are the lance emitters on the Verdict's wing escorts. Disable, do not destroy. A mystery began to form in Thorn's mind. Why disable such small targets when the flagship itself was the primary threat? He held the question, trusting the Admiral's larger plan. Vipers are away. The ledger of this day will be written in light. The Viper's small and agile strike craft accelerated into the void. They were gnats against titans, their engines flaring like tiny sparks. On the main view screen, the Ascendancy ships moved with an unthinking, brutalist grace. They were confident in their numbers, in their doctrine of overwhelming force. Rostova watched, her posture relaxed, but her mind a whirlwind of calculations. Heat budgets, fuel consumption, reaction times. Every element was a variable in an equation she had to solve before that crimson timer hit zero. Julian. What is the Proctor's psychological profile? High dominance, low cognitive flexibility. The AI responded instantly. He has never lost a direct confrontation. His strategy relies on predictable escalations. He will interpret our feint as weakness and our disabling strikes as desperation, Good Rostova said. Everything depends on him being exactly who he thinks he is. Brace for the count. The first Viper Squadron reached the Ascendancy escorts. Lost cutters designed for precise surgical strikes fired in pinpoint bursts. The Ascendancy ships built for brawling were slow to react. Their point defense systems were calibrated for incoming torpedoes, not for such delicate, targeted attacks. First escort's port lance emitter is offline. Thorn reported, a flicker of admiration in his voice. Second escort is maneuvering to protect its starboard side. Vipers are already repositioning. The Ascendancy's response was predictable. The Verdict began to power its main weapon, the particle lance glowing with nascent fury. They intended to swat a fly with a sledgehammer. The flagship is charging, Thorn warned. The low thrum of the Indomitable's own systems felt like a held breath. Now we open the gate. Activate the decoys, Rostova commanded. All 72. Full power. Project the lattice directly on top of our Viper Squadron's position. In an instant, the space around the tiny Vipers erupted with phantom energy. 72 capital ship signatures bloomed on the Ascendancy's sensors, a sudden, impossible fleet appearing from nowhere. The light from the decoy projectors created a shimmering holographic wall of warships, where only empty space had been a moment before. The Proctor on the bridge of the Verdict would be seeing a trap sprung too late. His fighter screen was out of position, his cruisers were chasing ghosts, and his flagship's ultimate weapon was aimed at a specter. The Verdict has fired its lance, Julian stated. A brilliant beam of energy wide enough to vaporize an asteroid tore through the heart of the decoy lattice. It passed through the shimmering images without effect, a monument to wasted power. The Vipers, their mission complete, were already burning for the cover of the asteroid field. The cost of that single pointless shot was a 4-minute recharge cycle, a 4-minute invitation. The convoy goes, how? Rostova ordered, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. All freighters full burn straight through the gap our Phantom fleet created. Escort them with the 3rd Cruiser Division. Julian, saturate their short-range comms with redundant transport manifests. flood them with useless data. On the main screen, the lumbering civilian ships surged forward. They were slow, vulnerable, but they were moving. The Ascendancy cruisers, realizing their mistake, began to turn their engines, straining to correct their course. But they were heavy, and inertia is a cruel mistress. The low resonant hum of the Indomitable's engines shifted pitch as power was rerouted to the communications array. "Thorn, what's the status of the blockade line at the gate?" Rostova asked, her gaze fixed on the unfolding tactical ballet. "Stretched thin, Admiral. They've pulled 2 heavy cruiser squadrons to chase our Vipers and the Phantom jump signatures. The gate is covered by only a destroyer picket line. A reckoning is not about punishment. It is about balance." Before the Ascendancy command could fully process the decoy gambit, the next phase of Rostova's plan was in motion. The trap was not just about creating a path for the convoy. It was about reshaping the entire battlefield. "Julian, deploy the second wave of drones," Rostova commanded. Not the lattice decoys. The mirrors. This was the reveal Thorn had been waiting for. It wasn't just about creating false targets. It was about turning the Ascendancy's own power against them. 100 smaller drones, silent and cold, detached from the hulls of Rostova's cruisers. They sped towards the asteroid field, their mirrored surfaces reflecting the distant starlight. They believe their power is absolute. "We will show them it is borrowed." A junior technician monitoring the ship's heat exchangers wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. The system was running hot, diverting massive energy to the EW suite and the drone launchers. The air in her station was thick with the scent of warm metal and ozone. She could feel the ship's strain as a low-frequency vibration in her bones, a testament to the fine line they were walking. "Mirror drones are in position," Admiral Julian confirmed. "They are using the asteroids for cover, establishing a multi-layered reflection grid. We can redirect focused energy with a 70% efficiency." "The Verdict's lance is at 50% charge," Thorn added, his eyes wide with understanding. "They're preparing to fire on the convoy." Rostova's expression was grim. "They won't fire on the convoy. They'll fire on us. They have to reassert dominance." She pointed to a position on the map, a point in empty space between her fleet and the escaping freighters. "Put us right there. Hold the line until the mirrors are set." The Indomitable and its escorts moved not to attack, not to flee, but to offer a target. It was a move of calculated sacrifice, a deliberate placement of the Queen on the board. The Ascendancy, enraged and confused, would not be able to resist such a tempting target. They would see it as the desperate last stand of a cornered foe. The Proctor's voice boomed across the open channels again, this time laced with fury. "You think these tricks will save you, Terran? You have only delayed the inevitable. The Verdict will now cleanse your flagship from the field." Rostova allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Thank you for your predictability, Proctor," she whispered to herself. The deck plates beneath her feet vibrated with the charge building in her ship's own defensive systems. The countdown timer ticked past the 1-hour mark. "Their anger is the fulcrum on which we will pivot the system." "Verdict's lance is at 90%, Thorn called out. The tension on the bridge was a physical thing, a crushing weight. Every officer was at their station, their movements economical and precise. Julian, Rostova said, her voice steady. "Align the mirrors. Target the Verdict's own bridge." The AI's response was immediate. "Mirrors are aligned. The lattice is ready to receive. The geometry is poetic." The final seconds of the Proctor's charge cycle felt like an eternity. The Indomitable's shields glowed, bracing for an impact they were not designed to withstand. But the blow would not fall on them. It would be returned to sender. "The universe demands balance," Lance fired, Thorn shouted, as the beam of incandescent rage erupted from the Ascendancy flagship. It crossed the void in a heartbeat, a torrent of energy aimed squarely at the Indomitable. But just before it reached them, the space in front of the Terran fleet seemed to fold. The 100 mirror drones positioned with microscopic precision caught the beam. They redirected it, bent it, and focused it back along a new path. The particle lance, a weapon of system-shattering power, was turned upon its creator. The beam, still burning with unstoppable energy, slammed into the bridge of the verdict. The Ascendancy flagship shuddered its forward section, vanishing in a silent, blossoming flower of white-hot plasma. The attack had been perfectly, flawlessly reflected. A debt paid in the debtor's own coin. For a moment, there was stunned silence on the bridge of the Indomitable. Then Thorn let out a shaky breath. Hostile flagship has sustained catastrophic damage. Command and control is severed. Their fleet is in disarray. The console glare reflected in his eyes no longer seemed so harsh. Did we just win? A young ensign whispered from the back of the bridge. Rostova's gaze was still fixed on the main screen where the Ascendancy fleet was beginning to break formation. Their cohesion shattered with their flagship. "No, ensign," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We just made our point." The cost was visible even from this distance. The mirror drones, their delicate surfaces, flash-burned and ruined by the energy they had redirected, tumbled uselessly into the void. A minor but necessary expenditure. Their ultimatum has been returned. The civilian convoy was now safely approaching the anaphase gate. The path was clear, but the battle was not over. The remaining Ascendancy ships, leaderless and enraged, still posed a threat. They were a wounded beast, unpredictable and dangerous. Julian broadcast a message to the Ascendancy fleet. Rostova ordered, "Tell them the lesson is over. They can leave now or they can stay for the final exam." This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Admiral Julian said, its tone shifting subtly. "I am detecting a new energy signature, a massive one, emerging from the anaphase gate. It does not match any known Ascendancy profile." On the screen, the swirling vortex of the gate began to distort. Something vast and ancient was coming through. The countdown timer on Rostova's screen, forgotten in the heat of the engagement, was replaced by a new, unknown symbol. The second escalation had arrived, and it was not from the enemy they knew. A new player has joined the game. A civilian teacher on Viridia, who had been watching the battle unfold on a public feed with her students, gathered the children close. They had seen the enemy flagship burn, and a cheer had erupted in the small shelter. But now a new fear, cold and vast, silenced them. She looked at the terrified faces around her and knew that the lesson Admiral Rostova was teaching in the void was far from over. "Identify the new contact," Julian Rostova commanded, her voice betraying no hint of alarm. The deck vibrated again, this time with a deep, unsettling resonance that seemed to come from space itself. Unable to comply, Admiral, the AI responded. "Its energy readings are paradoxical. It appears to be both infinitely dense and occupying no space at all. It is breaking known physical laws." The shape that emerged from the gate was a perfect sphere of absolute blackness. It absorbed all light, all sensor pings, all hope. It was not a ship. It was a void. The old rules no longer apply. The remaining Ascendancy ships, which had been stumbling in confusion, seemed to find a new purpose. They turned not towards Rostova's fleet, but towards the black sphere. They formed a defensive perimeter around it, as if protecting a revered icon. The proctor may have been silenced, but the doctrine remained. "They're protecting it." Thorn breathed, his tactical mind struggling to process the impossible. They knew it was coming. The ultimatum wasn't from the fleet. It was from whatever this thing was. The fleet was just the fist. This was the will behind it. The mystery of the Ascendancy's rigid, almost suicidal adherence to their doctrine was beginning to reveal itself. It wasn't arrogance. It was worship. "We are not fighting soldiers. We are fighting acolytes." New broadcast Admiral, the communications officer, reported, her voice strained. "It's coming from the sphere." "Audio only," Rostova nodded. "Put it on." The voice that filled the bridge was not synthesized or biological. It sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates, like the collapse of stars. It was a voice of immense gravity and timeless age. "The tally is incomplete," the voice stated. It was not a threat. It was a statement of cosmic accounting. "The price for your defiance must be paid. The ledger demands it." The black sphere pulsed once, a wave of gravitational distortion washing over the system. The Indomitable groaned, its structural integrity field screaming in protest. A red warning light flashed on a side console, minor stress fractures along the port nacelle. A tangible cost for simply being in the presence of this entity. "A debt has been called," Julian Rostova said, her mind racing faster than it ever had before. Cross-reference this entity's energy signature and vocal patterns with every known record, every myth, every xenotheological text we have. She was looking for a name, a weakness, a precedent, anything. "Already searching," Admiral Julian replied. "The search parameters are broad. But there is one recurring myth from a dozen extinct civilizations. A story of a being they called the final arbiter. A cosmic accountant that arrives to balance the scales of civilizations it deems unruly." The pieces clicked into place. The Ascendancy were not conquerors. They were evangelists, heralds of a God of ultimate unyielding order. Their ultimatums were not threats of war. They were summons to judgment. "It doesn't want the planet," Rostova realized aloud. "It wants us. It wants to make an example of our defiance." The mirror reflected a weapon. Now it must reflect a soul. Rostova looked at the tactical display. The Ascendancy fleet, now reformed and resolute, was advancing. The black sphere hung behind them, a silent, omnipotent judge. Her mirror drones were spent. Her decoy gambit was a one-time trick. Her fleet was still outnumbered, but she had one thing the Arbiter and its followers did not. She had the capacity for mercy, for improvisation, for hope. And she had a fleet mind capable of calculations that transcended simple combat geometry. Julian. She began a new strategy, forming one born not of tactics, but of philosophy. Run a projection. What is the one thing a being obsessed with absolute balance cannot account for? The AI paused for a fraction of a second. "An act of unearned grace, Admiral. A variable entered into the equation that has no preceding cause. A gift." Rostova's eyes met the unwavering crimson light of Julian's central optic. "Then we shall give them one. We will answer their ledger with a blank page." Thorn Rostova's voice was crisp, cutting through the rising fear on the bridge. "Bring us about. Set a course directly for the Arbiter. All remaining power to the forward shields. We are going to get very, very close." The crew of the Indomitable exchanged looks of disbelief, then hardened their resolve. They had trusted the Admiral through the mirror gambit. They would trust her now. The ship turned its engines, burning bright, a single point of light, moving toward an all-consuming darkness. The scent of recycled air on the bridge suddenly seemed precious, a reminder of the life at stake. The Ascendancy ships opened fire. Beams of energy hammered against the Indomitable's shields, the impacts ringing through the hull like the blows of a giant's hammer. The shield indicator dropped percent by agonizing percent. 80. 70. 60. "Shields are buckling," Admiral Thorn yelled over the roar. "Hold steady," Rostova commanded, her hand gripping the edge of the plotting table to keep her balance. "Julian, open a ship-wide channel. I want every soul on this vessel to hear me. A moment of choice is upon us." Her voice, calm and resolute, filled every corridor, every mess hall, every damage control station on the ship. "This is the Admiral. We are not fighting for territory. We are not fighting for glory. We are fighting for the idea that mercy is not a weakness and that second chances are the bedrock of civilization." She paused, letting the ship shudder around her words. "The being before us understands only balance, debt, and payment. It believes every action must have an equal and opposite reaction. We are about to prove that doctrine incomplete. On the main screen, the black sphere grew until it filled the entire view. It was like staring into the abyss. The ship's proximity alarms shrieked a desperate, high-pitched warning. Julian Rostova said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Prepare to execute the offering protocol. Their weapon is finality. Ours is a new beginning. The offering protocol was a theoretical strategy, a wild gamble born from Julian's deepest ethical subroutines. It had never been attempted. It involved the complete voluntary and public jettisoning of a ship's entire armament. Every torpedo, every missile, every ounce of ammunition, and the deliberate, verifiable powering down of every energy weapon. It was an act of unilateral disarmament in the face of annihilation, a variable without precedent, a gift, jettisoning all ordnance. Thorne confirmed his face, a mask of disciplined disbelief as he keyed in the commands. Disarming all weapon systems. We are for all tactical purposes defenseless. The ship shuddered again this time as its payload doors opened and its entire arsenal was ejected into the void. The torpedoes and missiles tumbled silently inert and harmless, a cloud of discarded teeth. The energy conduits to the ship's cannons went cold, and a new quiet fell over the bridge. It was the quiet of utter vulnerability. The account is closed. The Ascendancy fleet ceased firing, their commanders clearly baffled by the move. They awaited instructions from their god. The black sphere remained silent, observing processing this illogical act. The voice of the Arbiter returned, the tectonic grinding laced with something new, a hint of confusion. This is not a valid transaction. Your defiance is unpaid. The balance is not met. Rostova stepped forward, her eyes on the view screen. You are correct, she broadcast into the void, her voice steady and clear for all to hear. There is no transaction. There is no debt. We are not settling an account. We are offering a choice. She gestured to the disarmed fleet, to the convoy now clear of the gate to the silent battlefield. You can continue your cycle of judgment, and we will meet you with empty hands every time. Or you can witness this act for what it is, proof that the ledger you worship is incomplete. There is more to the universe than crime and punishment. A new column has been added to the ledger. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the crew held its breath. The air was thick with the faint, clean scent of life support working overtime. The heat from the earlier shield impacts had turned the metal bulkheads warm to the touch. Every sensory input was heightened, every second stretched into an eternity. The black sphere pulsed again, not with gravity, but with a wave of pure information. It washed over the Terran fleet, a scan so deep and intrusive it felt like a violation of the soul. Julian's optic flickered wildly. Admiral, the Arbiter is accessing our historical records, our philosophical texts, our art. It is reading us. Let it read, Rostova said softly. Let it see who we are. The silence stretched. Then the voice of the Arbiter spoke one final time. Its tone was different. The grinding had ceased. It sounded thoughtful. A paradox. An unbalanced equation. New data is required. The black sphere began to shrink, folding in on itself until it was a point of light no bigger than a star. Then, with a flash that left a lingering imprint on every eye, it vanished. The Ascendancy fleet, their god departed, hung in space as if suddenly orphaned. Their rigid formations wavered, a silent testament to a shattered faith. We do not break chains, we show there are no locks. Rostova watched them for a long moment. She could have given the order to rearm and annihilate them. It would have been easy. It would have been just by some measures. But the lesson had to be consistent. Julian, she said, send them a message. Just 2 words. Across the void, A simple, unencrypted text message appeared on the main view screen of every Ascendancy ship. It was not a threat. It was not a demand. It was an invitation. Choose differently. She turned away from the screen, the adrenaline of the last 2 hours finally beginning to recede, leaving a profound weariness in its place. The crisis was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The Ascendancy had been shown a different path. Whether they would walk it was a question for another day. The timer was gone. The ultimatum was broken. The people of Viridia were safe. The bridge was quiet, the only sound the gentle hum of a ship that had faced oblivion and survived. Thorn looked at Rostova, a new respect dawning in his eyes. "Admiral." "What now?" Rostova allowed a rare, tired smile to touch her lips. "Now, Commander, now we go home, and we update the ledger." The cost of the engagement had been minimal in terms of lives, but the Indomitable would bear the scars of the Arbiter's presence for months. The minor stress fractures in the hull were a physical reminder of the day they had stared down a god and offered it a new idea. It was a cost she was more than willing to pay. A lesson had been taught not with weapons, but with the profound, unassailable power of a choice freely given. The precedent was set. The doctrine of the ultimatum was not just defeated, it was rendered obsolete. On the public galactic record, a new entry would be logged, a testament to the day Task Force 17 faced down the final Arbiter. It would state that doctrines of absolute judgment were now recognized not as a strength, but as a failure of imagination. The lights on the tactical display dimmed their harsh glare, softening to a gentle pewter. Rostova looked at her own reflection in the dark screen, at the weary faces of her crew mirrored behind her. They had held the line. They had balanced the books not with blood, but with courage. The universe was vast and often cold, but today a small flicker of warmth had been introduced into its unforgiving calculus. A new variable had been proven. Mercy was not a flaw in the equation. It was the answer. They came to judge us. We taught them to wonder. The silence that followed the Arbiter's departure was heavier than any sound. The Ascendancy fleet, once a unified instrument of judgment, was now just a collection of ships, their purpose extinguished. On the Indomitable's main view screen, their formation lights blinked in a rhythm of confusion. For a full minute, the void was a frozen tableau of shock. Admiral Julian's voice was the first to break the stillness. "Multiple Ascendancy vessels are hailing us. Their encryption is rudimentary. They are broadcasting surrender protocols." On screen, Rostova ordered, her voice low. A dozen windows bloomed across the display, each showing the face of an Ascendancy ship captain. They were a species humanoid in shape, but with skin the color of polished obsidian and eyes that held no pupils. For the first time, Rostova saw not zealots, but soldiers. And they were lost. They were built for answers, not for questions. One of the captains spoke, his voice stripped of the grating certainty of the proctor. Our directive is gone. The Arbiter has withdrawn. We request terms." Before Rostova could reply, another transmission sliced through the channel, overriding the others. The face that appeared was sharp, severe, her obsidian features taut with fury. Gold epaulets on her uniform marked her as High Command. "This is Vindicator Kalen of the Ascendancy Third Fleet. The Proctor has fallen, but the doctrine has not. You will not profane his sacrifice with this cowardice." She turned her gaze, somehow making it feel like a physical blow, directly at Rostova's camera. "You Terran, your trickery has bought you nothing. You have blasphemed against the sacred balance. We will purify this system even if it means our own immolation." The zealot clings to the altar long after the god has left. The Vindicator's channel closed. On the tactical map, a third of the remaining Ascendancy ships turned their engine signatures flaring red. They formed a new aggressive line around Kalen's flagship, the Retribution. The other two-thirds remained hesitant, caught between a lifetime of doctrine and a new terrifying doubt. "She is rallying the devout," Thorn said, his voice grim. The bridge, which had felt a moment of relief, was now charged with a new kind of tension. "She commands 7 cruisers and 20 frigates. They are out for blood, not philosophy. And they are moving not toward us, but toward the Anaphase Gate." Julian added a new element of urgency in its tone, specifically toward the spatial distortion left by the Arbiter's departure. A new icon pulsed on the map, a cancerous-looking swirl of chaotic energy. "That anomaly is unstable," Julian Rostova asked. Highly, the AI confirmed. The low hum of the ship's life support seemed to amplify the sudden sense of danger. "It is a wound in space-time. If it destabilizes violently, the resulting energy release would sterilize this entire system. Viridia would be scoured to the bedrock." The Vindicator's plan was horrifyingly clear. If she couldn't enforce the Arbiter's judgment, she would deliver it herself. A broken faith is the most dangerous weapon of all. "She is turning their doubt into a funeral pyre," Rostova whispered. The choice Kalen was offering her remaining followers was simple, glorious martyrdom or the shame of survival. For a mind steeped in absolutism, the choice was obvious. A priority message flashed on Rostova's personal console. It was from the planetary governor of Viridia. The text was short, a stark counterpoint to the cosmic drama unfolding in orbit. "Admiral, we are broadcasting your victory. We are naming children after you. Please, tell us it's over." Rostova closed her eyes for a single weary second. The weight of 3 million lives saved once was now back on the scales. "Julian, tell the surrendering Ascendancy captains to move to Rally Point Beta behind us. Assure them they will be protected. Thorn, rearm our weapon systems. But our firing protocols remain on surgical lock. We will not be what they expect us to be. Their doctrine demands a monster. We will not oblige." The Indomitable and its escort fleet moved to position themselves between the Vindicator's zealots and the unstable anomaly. The Ascendancy ships that had surrendered began a slow, hesitant retreat, their movements a mixture of relief and fear. It was a separation of the flock, a division of faith played out in the cold mechanics of orbital positioning. "Vindicator Kalen is broadcasting again system-wide," the communications officer announced. Kalen's face was a mask of righteous fury. "Behold the Terran's hypocrisy. They speak of mercy, yet they raise their swords. They are no different. They only wish to impose their own doctrine of chaos. Join me and we will die with purpose cleansed in the Arbiter's final fire." "She's not trying to win," Rostova said. "She's trying to be proven right. A soul that only sees nails will always be a hammer." The deck plates of the Indomitable vibrated as the torpedo bays were reloaded, a deep mechanical growl from the ship's gut. The familiar scent of ozone returned as the energy weapon capacitors were charged. The ship was a predator once more, its teeth regrown, but its instincts now tempered by a new kind of discipline. "Admiral, the Vindicator's lead ships are beginning to fire on the anomaly," Thorn reported, his voice tight. "They are deliberately attempting to destabilize it." "Their weapons are having an effect," Julian stated. "The anomaly's energy output is increasing exponentially. We have perhaps 30 minutes until it reaches critical cascade." A new timer appeared on the screen, this one a sickly yellow. 30 Orcs. Rostova's mind, which had moments before been contemplating the nuances of philosophy, was now a razor of tactical focus. The mirror gambit had worked because it was unexpected. The offering protocol had worked because it was illogical. Now she needed something that was both. "We can't destroy her ships. The debris would only accelerate the cascade," Rostova thought aloud. "We can't let her get close enough to ram the anomaly. We have to remove her from the board." "This isn't a battle. It's an extraction," Julian Rostova said, a daring, almost insane plan forming. Plot a containment field projection, narrow beam maximum intensity. I don't want to envelop her ships. I want to build a wall. Thorn looked up from his console. A wall of energy, Admiral. The power draw would be astronomical. We'd have to divert from shields, from weapons, from life support. We won't need shields if the wall holds, Rostova countered. And we will only be firing one weapon. She turned to face her tactical officer. Commander, I want you to target the Retribution's engines, not with a torpedo, with a tractor beam. The reveal hit Thorn like a physical shock. They weren't going to fight the Vindicator. They were going to grab her ship and drag it kicking and screaming out of the fight. Their faith is in death. We will sentence them to life. A crewman in the aft engineering bay monitored the flow of plasma to the tractor beam emitters. The conduits glowed cherry red through their protective casings, the system being pushed far beyond its designed limits. He could feel the raw power as a deep gut-rumbling vibration, a controlled earthquake held in check by magnetic fields and the sheer will of the crew. His heartbeat seemed to sync with the rhythmic thrum. The Loyalist Ascendancy ships have cleared the area, Admiral Thorn confirmed. It's just us and the Zealots. Julian, begin the containment field projection, Rostova ordered. Form a barrier between Kalen's fleet and the anomaly. Thorn, the moment that wall is up, you fire that beam. The Indomitable shuddered as a colossal amount of its energy was diverted. A shimmering plane of blue-white light erupted from the ship's forward projectors. It solidified in the void, a translucent kilometer-high wall of pure force. It was a line drawn in the sand, a declaration made not of words, but of physics. The universe is made of lines. The brave decide where they are drawn. The Vindicator's ships, caught by surprise, flew straight into it. Their kinetic energy was absorbed and dissipated, their forward momentum halted with a silent, jarring shock. For a moment, her entire fleet was pinned against the energy barrier like moths in a bug zapper. Wall is holding, but the power drain is critical. The engineering officer's voice crackled over the comm. We have 90 seconds of integrity, tops. That's all we need, Rostova said, her gaze locked on the Retribution. Thorn, now! From the Indomitable's ventral hull, a cone of pale green light shot out. It wasn't a weapon of destruction, but of control. The beam locked onto the Vindicator's flagship, its powerful gravitational tethers sinking deep into the vessel's superstructure. The ship strained against the grip, its engines firing at maximum, but it was caught. Anchor the madness. We have her. Thorn shouted, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. Reverse thrust, pull her away from that wall. The Indomitable's engines roared, the ship itself now acting as the anchor. It was a tug of war on a cosmic scale. The Vindicator's ship bucked and twisted in the tractor beam's grip, firing its weapons wildly, but the shots splashed harmlessly against the containment field. The other Zealot ships, freed from their paralysis, began to fire on the Indomitable. Lances of energy hammered against its unpowered shields. Direct hull impacts, the damage control officer screamed over the comm. Multiple breaches on decks 7 and 9. We have wounded. A cost paid in plasma, burns, and fractured metal. Steady the scale. Ignore the hits, Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with authority. Keep pulling. The 90-second window for the containment wall was closing. The barrier began to flicker, its light fading. But it had done its job. The Retribution had been pulled clear of its fleet, dragged 100 kilometers back. The other Zealot ships, now leaderless and with a clear path to the anomaly, hesitated. Their Vindicator was gone, their charge had been broken. The wall is down, Julian announced calmly. The remaining Zealot ships, their fervor broken, their leader captured, simply stopped. Their engine lights dimmed. The fire of their faith had been extinguished. On the tactical display, their threat indicators flickered from red to a neutral gray. They cannot follow a martyr who refuses to die. The Indomitable, its hull scorched and bleeding atmosphere from a dozen minor wounds, held the Retribution fast in its grip. The anomaly still pulsed, the yellow timer now under 10 minutes, but without the Vindicator's ships to agitate it, its decay had slowed. Rostova opened a direct channel to Kalen's bridge. Vindicator. It's over. Your fleet has stood down. Your path to martyrdom is closed. Kalen's face appeared on the screen. She was no longer furious. She was empty. The fire was gone, leaving only ashes. You should have killed me, she whispered. A warrior's death is all I had left. Death is not a reward we give, Vindicator, Rostova, replied her voice cold, but not cruel. You wanted to make a statement with your death. Instead, you will make one with your life. You will be a living testament to a failed doctrine. You will watch your people learn a new way. A tally of one is the cruelest lesson. With the immediate threat contained, Rostova turned her attention to the dying anomaly. Julian is there any way to stabilize it? Negative, Admiral, the AI replied. But we can influence the cascade. If we introduce a precise amount of energy at a specific resonant frequency, we can force the collapse to vent perpendicular to the galactic plane. It would still be a cataclysmic event, but it would be focused. Viridia would be spared. What is the cost? Rostova asked, already knowing the answer. It would require the focused energy of our main cannon fired from point-blank range, Julian said. The ship that fires the shot will be caught in the initial blast. Survival is improbable. Before anyone could protest, the hailing channel from the surrendered Ascendancy ships reactivated. It was the same captain who had spoken first. Admiral Rostova, he said, his voice heavy with a newfound resolve. We have monitored your exchange. We understand. The balance you spoke of, a debt must be paid. He paused, and behind him his crew could be seen working at their consoles with a grim purpose. We were instruments of an ultimatum. It is only fitting we become instruments of the atonement. We will fire the shot. An unexpected variable can rebalance the world. Rostova looked at the face of the Ascendancy captain, a man who an hour ago would have gladly sterilized a planet on principle. She saw in his obsidian eyes the first fragile spark of a new idea. He was choosing differently. Your sacrifice will be honored, Rostova said, her voice thick with an emotion she rarely allowed herself. It will be the first entry in a new ledger between our peoples. She watched as one of the Ascendancy cruisers, the Steadfast Truth, broke from the pack. It moved with a steady grace toward the roiling anomaly, a lone ship on a pilgrimage of redemption. The Indomitable released the retribution, leaving it to float powerless and defeated as its former allies prepared to save the system it had tried to doom. The teacher learns when the student pays the price. The Steadfast Truth reached its position. It fired its main weapon into the heart of the swirling chaos. For a single silent moment, the energy was absorbed. Then the anomaly collapsed. A torrent of incandescent energy brighter than 1,000 suns erupted from the point of detonation. It was a pure, focused beam of cosmic rage venting harmlessly into the intergalactic void. The Steadfast Truth, caught in the blast's edge, was consumed in a flash of silent, cleansing light. The system of Viridia was safe. The cost had been paid not by the righteous, but by the redeemed. It was a price that changed everything. On the bridge of the Indomitable, there was only a profound and respectful silence. The heat from the ship's overstressed systems began to cool, and the scent of ozone was replaced by the clean, sterile air of the scrubbers. The battle was truly over. The institutional consequence was swift and galactic in scale. Rostova's public logs of the engagement, including the Arbiter's retreat and the Ascendancy's sacrifice, led to the unanimous passing of the Rostova precedent. The issuance of a non-negotiable ultimatum with a civilian population at stake was now classified as a crime against sentient life, outlawing the core of the Ascendancy doctrine forever. The public ledger confirmed it. The Vindicator Kalen and her surviving zealots were taken into custody not for execution, but for re-education. The remaining 2/3 of her fleet formally surrendered to Task Force 17, not as prisoners of war, but as the first students in a new interspecies dialogue. The mirror had not just reflected a weapon. It had reflected a possibility, and an entire culture had turned to face it. Rostova stood on her bridge looking out at the stars. The anomaly was gone, replaced by a beautiful expanding nebula of iridescent gas, a monument to a sacrifice that had rebalanced more than just a star system. Her crew was tending to the wounded and patching the holes in their ship, the quiet, heroic work that followed the storm. The tally was complete, the ledger balanced, not by an ancient god of judgment, but by the messy, complicated, and ultimately hopeful choices of mortals. She thought of the Ascendancy captain and his final defiant act of grace. He had not died for a doctrine or a god. He had died for an idea that it is never too late to choose a better way. That she knew was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. The mirror arrays on her fleet, now cooling to a dull pewter in the starlight, seemed to hold the memory of it all. Our strength is not in the ultimatums we deliver, but in the choices we offer. It is not our capacity for righteous vengeance that defines us, but our stubborn, unyielding belief in second chances. We came here expecting to fight a war, to settle an account with fire and steel. Instead, we were reminded that the most powerful weapon in the universe is a changed mind. The ledger is long, and the final tally is never truly known, but today a new column was added, one marked not for victory, but for grace. We are the anchor, the mirror, and the open hand.